All right, we are live, and I'll just wait a second or two. Hi, Jody.
Hi, Steve. How are you
So good
today?
to see you. Great. Oh, we've got folks coming in. I see some folks from Orlando. Doing great. So I
Awesome.
think we've got a lot to talk about today. We're worried about going over. So I think we just dive right in if it works for you. So good morning, good afternoon. I'll say good evening to some folks. We try to find a time that worked best for everyone. This session is being recorded, so know that you can go back at your own leisure and look through the entirety or just the components that make the most sense for you. First and foremost, thank you for joining us for this roughly 1 hour session today. We are going to have the ability, as I said before, to go back and review some of this stuff. Our intention is to save about 15 minutes towards the end for questions, and we'll be marking those questions on the side. We've got some help in the background to do that. And a quick thank you to all of those who submitted questions ahead of time. So give us a lot to think about and should add to the conversation today. So thanks again for that. So we're going to go through a few topics in and around the subject of Google Workspace, but the focus really is going to be around this idea of Google Guides, the Google Guides program, and really how it relates to adoption. So this session is designed for those of you who are interested in Google Workspace adoption at your organizations. If you're interested in improving employee satisfaction, we'll even dabble into the topic of cultural transformation, if that's something that is interesting to you. We'll certainly touch on it. But really, the real spirit here is to contribute some methods, resources, tips and tricks, if you will, really just to spark some interest in those of you who are close to this topic, want to be close to this topic. So if you come away from this meeting having learned one thing, we'll consider it a success. So as we get started, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Steve Schenk, and I'm a Google Workspace Customer Success Manager. I'm based out of New York City, the Big Apple. And what is a Customer Success Manager at Google? So my job basically entails having the great fortune of getting to work with some of Google's largest Google Workspace customers. And I've done so for several years now. So I get to help them with all things in and around Workspace. But at the end of the day, adoption is my primary focus. So it's been some time thinking about doing a session, how to get some of this word out. And as I was thinking of a way to share out more about this topic with the wider community, there is one individual that immediately came to mind who's not only a practitioner, but someone I would consider very much a subject matter expert. And that is Jody Carroll. So with that said, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to someone I've been fortunate enough to work with these past couple years. Jody, can I ask you to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here with you today, Steve. You know, you're one of my favorite Googlers. We get to meet every week, at least twice a week, and I get to share some of the things that are going on inside our organization. This topic, as you know, is near and dear to my heart. I work for a large organization, about 27,000 employees. When I started in this role that I'm in now, which I started as an executive assistant, believe it or not, being very enthusiastic about Google Workspace adoption, and wound up in the role that I'm in today, which is the facilitator of the Google Guides program at my company. But that is only one part of my job. I do want people to take away today a couple of things that I think are really important. And that is that the Google Guides program here at our organization has been developing for about 7 years now. And I say developing because it really has been an evolution. That did not start overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. The program has definitely evolved over the years, constantly thinking of ways to make it better, to improve our Google adoption. That's what it's all about for us. We're laser focused on Google adoption. As you know, a lot of changes are made to the program. I think you said something to the tune of 400 enhancements last year. I think I always say about 15 to 20 of those enhancements per month really impact our team members and their productivity. We are here today because of the team that I lead. They are awesome volunteers. So I want to make that really clear. They are volunteers, but they love doing what they do. They love helping their peers. And you all that are on this call can do this. If I can do it, I know you can do it, because this is just one part of my role. I also handle change management for all of our acquisitions. We are an acquirer. I would like to say in the financial industry, we're constantly acquiring companies. So this program, again, grows and evolves because of that. And I also handle a lot of training for our team members as we acquire new companies. Obviously, we move them into Google Workspace, and then I need to train them on how to do Google Workspace. Again, could not do that without the Google Guides. So this, again, is just a small portion of what I do. I'm excited to get started, Steve, so lead the way.
Thank you for the kind words, as always. And something that stuck out, and we talked about this before we met, is just this notion of an evolution. So it starts somewhere, and I just want to make sure that that is in focus as we talk through this, because we'll talk about some of the kind of advancements that you've made, some discoveries, but it all had very humble beginnings, which I think is an important distinction.
Yes.
All right. So some of the topics we're going to go through today, pretty simple. So what is a Google Guide? Why Google Guides? How do we get you started with this? We'll talk about some general kind of knowledge share, some tips and tricks. By no means is this meant to suggest that there's one and only way to do these sorts of activities. You'll learn that very quickly throughout the session. So keep that in mind, and ideally we'll end with some Q&A. So without further ado, Jody, take us through Google Guides.
Yeah, so this is an organization within our company that are all volunteers, and we have a company that is worldwide. We're in, I don't even know how many locations. I think 30 locations all over the world, if not more. And so the Google Guides really help all of our employees all over the organization utilize the Google Workspace tools. So as the enhancements come through, the Google Guides are, teaching their fellow counterparts how to use them. Part of that, what we've noticed early on, is that it really does reduce support costs, primarily because the Google Guides are taking some of the work off of the technical support teams, because a lot of the questions that would typically go to your technical support team come into the Google Guides. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. It's definitely increased employee satisfaction within our organization. The team is a team that is sought after, believe it or not, at this point, after 7 years. People want to be part of the Google Guides team. And again, we are laser focused on Google Workspace adoption, and that's the reason why our Google Guides are such a valuable asset.
Really well said. And I think if we had to come away with kind of one key takeaway, it's nurturing, growing, and starting a Google Guides program is something that is worthwhile. There is an ROI at the end of the day with these efforts. Is that fair to say?
It's totally fair to say, yes.
That's great. So, Jody, what is a Google Guide? What is this name Google Guide? Why are they called guides?
Yeah, you may call them different things in your organization, right? We called them Google Guides. It's probably an older term, but now you may hear champions or you may hear ambassadors. These are the team members who are volunteers who are subject matter experts now. And they don't have to be subject matter experts when they join. We just look for people who are really passionate about Google Workspace and are really passionate about helping their colleagues understand and learn the platform. So they know the changes in the platform. They're eager and willing to share the enhancements, and they answer questions in person, in meetings, via a Google group email, via the various chat spaces that we've created. They share tips and tricks. Some of them even host their own meetings. So I, again, could not imagine our Google Workspace adoption here without them.
That's great. So now the next kind of hard question is, why should anybody want to spend any time putting this together? You've touched on it a little bit, but maybe we can go into a little more detail.
We're going to go in a little more detail as we go further, I'm hoping, because, I definitely want to talk about this as we go along.
That's perfect. So adoption, if there's one thing that I'm asked about time and time again, at least every week, sometimes it feels like it's daily, how does this help with adoption?
So, like I mentioned, adoption is always top of mind. As we acquire companies and they're coming in and they're brand new, it's going to hurt their productivity, right, if they're accustomed to using another tool. So the Google Guides are the ones that are going to, be part of the acquisition, get to know their fellow teammates. They're already in meetings with them, and they're going to teach them about the tools. So integrated chat and video conferencing are tools that, came along, especially as a result of COVID, right? And real-time collaboration is something that our CIO was really emphatic about. So when we moved to the cloud, he, wanted us to focus on how we work with each other, how we collaborate with each other. There's always significant change. And so we remain committed in providing the best possible experience for every single person that comes into the organization. And that cannot be a good experience if they don't learn how to use the Google Workspace tools. So we pretty much focus on, it's funny because we've swayed back and forth in certain things. Like in the beginning, we were purchasing Chromebooks, right? And then we realized there are some people within the organization that a Chromebook is just not going to work for, but it costs less. So that was one of the things we wanted to focus on is, a lesser cost. We also eliminate now pretty much putting any MS Office tools on any of our new hardware. So anybody new coming into the organization does not get Microsoft Office tools. And then I also, one of my goals for last year, and it will be again for this year, is to eliminate or remove Microsoft Office tools from anybody's laptop that really isn't using them any longer. Because what we have found is there's vulnerabilities, right? If you're not continually updating, then you have all these vulnerabilities and you have to do patchwork, et cetera. So we're always, keeping our Google Guides abreast of everything that's going on. No one person, I certainly couldn't do it. And I know you all are probably wondering, how can you get this done? I don't know how I would do it without the Google Guides. They are all over the world, as I mentioned before. So they're in different time zones. So they're speaking to their colleagues in their own language sometimes. And in their own time zone. So it's not like people all across the world. In the beginning, I remember that. Like I used to be sitting at my desk or sitting at home at 11 o'clock at night, and somebody from Australia would be asking me a question. So now the Google Guides are all over the world. They can answer the question. We've got Google Guides in Australia, Poland, Germany, et cetera. So they understand the culture. They understand the people's fear, et cetera.
Yeah, and something we've talked about before is they understand the job functions of the people that are sitting next to them as well. And why oftentimes, these frustrations can boil over, they can reach out to their neighbor oftentimes who are enthusiasts and these volunteers to kind of help them through. Because oftentimes these frustrations are really based in not knowing about certain features, not knowing about certain capabilities. So it's really what I've seen, at least with you, is nurturing that environment so that they're helping each other at an extremely I'll say locale within their industry and their organizations oftentimes. And I like what you said around even cultural. I know you travel around the world, did these sorts of trainings and onboarding. So that's great. Now this is an audacious statement. Wouldn't you say? Helps with support. How does that work?
I don't think did you move the slide? But yes, oh my goodness. So our Google Guides team members are really relieving our support desk technicians, because a lot of the questions that would typically come into them are being handled by the Google Guides. And, it's really kind of funny because it's gotten to a point now where they actually compete against each other to answer the questions. So before a ticket is even created and somebody has to wait, let's say a team member has to wait on a response, our Google Guides, if you send them an email, literally, I cannot believe it. I check it all the time myself. They're answering the email within 15 minutes. And then with the onset of Google Chat Spaces, I've seen such a benefit, and even increased benefit in a reduction of service support tickets for those teams. It has been such a success that our support technician leaders ask all of them to be Google Guides, because they want them to be in the know about the enhancements that Google is releasing. And then when the support ticket, if it were to get to the support desk technician, they'll know how to answer the question as well.
So that's amazing. So you've actually brought on some of the support technicians to be guides as well. But
Yes.
it sounds like a lot of the problems and questions that people have are solved before they have a chance to even make it to help desk. And it even sounds like it changes the nature of the questions that are asked and the ability of support when it does make it through to answer some of those questions. So that's great. And it makes sense. Now, reduces surprises. What are your thoughts around this?
So, we learned fairly early on that Google is going to be making changes constantly to the product, right? So we started, I think you said 400 last year, 15 to 20 per month is what we kind of typically say. We realized that we needed to get ahead of our team members who were reading about these updates in the news and everywhere else, right? And they were bringing the updates to us, and we didn't even know about the updates yet. So what we started to do is meet weekly and go over those feature enhancements together. Our leader even has us focus on the visible changes, which are those things that are coming down the pike on the roadmap. And so whenever something, we know something's going to impact one of our other teams, we get the team leader on the call. For example, security. If we know something's going to impact our security team, we'll get our security team on the call with us, and tell them, this is going to impact us. There are times when we go over the feature enhancements and we decide not to turn a feature enhancement on. So, our admins have the option a lot of times, to not turn the feature on yet. So we make those calls during those meetings so that there aren't any surprises. And then the other part of the surprises is really, not only involving just the right teams, but also communicating those enhancements to our user base, our team members worldwide. So we're constantly communicating. First, the Google Guides hear it, and then the rest of the company.
Makes a lot of sense. So it's really just these proactive steps getting ahead of it, where in the past it sounds like you were finding out disparate information around releases and cobbling together and just trying to find some way in a disorganized fashion to make sure that folks were aware, to a much more mature model where you brought in security, you brought in other people, stakeholders within the organization, and structured a way to make sure that everyone is aware of changes that are coming. You're spot on. We did release over 400 feature releases last year. There's no slowdown in that coming in 2024. Some of you are closer to that than others, but that is the truth, and it is the truth that this represents several a week, and different stakeholders at different organizations will want to weigh in oftentimes and have questions about this or want to trial it in advance. So it's great that you found a way to get ahead of this before it becomes a potential issue.
Well, let me also mention it's been an evolution, right? So in the first couple of years, we didn't have those meetings, right? So we were like, what are we doing wrong? How are we not, how do we get ahead of this? How do we make this this challenge an opportunity for us? And so our leader, our current leader said, what, let's have weekly meetings. And those weekly meetings have really helped, because I'm responsible for the communication to our team base. And I know now, before I ever communicate whether or not it's going to be a product we're going to turn on, not turn on, and I'm communicating that to the Google Guides, who will be the first one saying, hey, we got to turn this one on. So our chat space is very heavily involved and very active.
It's great. I've seen this firsthand as well. Just part of the evolution that you've talked about it, and just getting ahead of it. And it really changes even the nature of how we interact with Google to you and your organization. It's much more. It feels much more streamlined. It feels much more prepared. The questions that we get are much different than those who don't have a program. They're thought through. Other eyes and minds have been on it before it has a chance to get to us. And I think both organizations have benefited from it, and more importantly, I think your end users have as well, your employees. All right, so this is the one. Again, this probably comes across my desk each week as well. So, how does a Google Guides program increase efficiency? What are we doing with productivity and collaboration? How are you looking at these sorts of things, Jody?
So we're looking at the metrics all the time, right? So we're trying to see who's still using the older products, where do we have vulnerabilities, and how are we able to use the metrics behind the scenes to know how successful have we been with adoption. So we're constantly looking at the metrics, and those metrics.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Jody.
No. Go ahead.
You sparked a thought. Where should organizations begin to start thinking about measuring productivity?
Oh, that's a really good question. When we started out the program, and I want to kind of mention this because I think it's really important. When we first decided to move to Google Workspace, we started with our early adopters. So our early adopters became our first Google Guides. And that's how I became a Google Guide. I was constantly being asked to go and train this executive, go and train that executive. And then finally we realized, and that's another really important designation that I'd like to make. You have to have the executive leader of that business unit on board. So we really focused and learned fairly early on that we needed to train the executive assistants and the executives first. And so we were looking at the metrics all the time, trying to see who was using Sheets, who was using Docs, and if they weren't, why weren't they using it? So a lot of our Google Guides, we would ask them, go out and ask your teammates, why aren't they using it? And so by utilizing the Google Guides, we were able to infiltrate right in their own team, right? And have somebody in their own team actually showing them how to use the product.
That's right. It's a topic we talk a lot about and that conversation's changed. And I think, we've come to this conclusion, and certainly with other organizations I work with, is some guidance is start with what's important with your organization. That's different. What's important? Is it making more widgets? Is it time on more meetings? Is it less meetings? What is that to you? There's mechanisms to track some of that, but you have to ask yourself those deep questions on what is it that you're trying to measure, and that's how you start down the path of kind of proving out this productivity. Um, Focus on the stuff that matters most. The other thing we kind of talked about tool consolidation as well. So bringing it all in. I know your organization at one point had a viewpoint, maybe still does to some degree, where you can have effectively any tool that you wish. And I see more organizations moving away from that model, where there's a consolidation, there's cost cutting, and there's just maturity in certain products as well. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts around that, just in terms of productivity and collaboration being in that
Yeah.
that being
So
in the
in the beginning, when we first moved to Google Workspace, we allowed everything, right? So we allowed every Chrome extension there was out there, et cetera, et cetera. And now, now that we have an allegiance with our security team, we can actually look at the security score. We have a whole team, that helps us with reducing risk when it comes to which Chrome extensions we approve and which ones we don't. So we allowed some to be grandfathered in, but yeah, tool consolidation is something we're all about. We're very lean and mean at our organization, and so we just don't have the time to really allow a lot of different tools into our organization.
Thanks for that, Jody. So we're going to get into, I think, more granularity around how we actually build this out. And I know this is something you have worked on. There has absolutely been an evolution over the past, what'd you say, 7 years, which is hard to believe. Just in terms of, okay, great, I sort of get what you're talking about. Maybe I know a little bit more than not. So how do I start this? Is this a 50-hour-a-week effort? Where do I actually get started?
So that's such a great question. I never thought it was going to be 50 hours a week, or I would have never jumped into the role. It started for us very small. Like I said, once our CIO decided to move to the cloud, and when we chose Google Workspace, we all were like, what is Google Workspace? What is the cloud? Do you remember back then? And I look at the word recruitment, and I don't want it to think it's so formal, because it really was never formal. The recruitment in the beginning was really us saying, hey, we're going to migrate. Our first wave of migration is going to be all of our tech folks, right? So we're going to migrate them onto Google Workspace first, because they're the ones that are going to grasp it easier than anyone else. So what we did was we said, hey, now that you are the early adopters, how about if you go out and help us with teaching other people as they come onto Google Workspace? So it was a program that was really running without us really calling it a Google Guides program. And then as time went on, we realized the benefits of having these tech folks be Google Guides. Now, not all of them said yes. Not all of them said, hey, yeah, I have the time in my day to go out and train other people. So one of the things that I do all the time is I'm constantly saying to people that are on the team, you know what, I understand that your bandwidth goes up and your bandwidth goes down. There's times when you can give more. There's times when you can't give as much to the program or your volunteer time commitment. Just give what you can. And you know what, if you're touching the people that are next to you or the people that you're in meetings with, then you're a great Google Guide, because you are helping us with our adoption within the organization. We started with about 5,000 employees. And as you heard me mention earlier, I think we're up to close to 30,000 employees now. Once the Google Guides got comfortable with the product and they started to understand, the enhancements were going to be coming, fast and furious, I started hosting meetings. So those meetings in the very beginning were not really very formal. They were just like, okay, now we're bringing on our, I would just inform the Google Guides that were on the team at the time. We're bringing on more people. This is when we're bringing them on. This is when we're going to do the changeover. This is when we're going to really need you to really kick in and go to your teammates and assist them with their fear, because a lot of them have change. Change is a big fear. And so having a peer right beside them was better than their leader saying, hey, we're moving to Google Workspace and you have to go or else, right? It was never that way at our organization. It was always come along with us and let us show you. So we took the people that were the most excited, the most enthusiastic, and that were having lots of fun. We started to have lots of fun doing it. And then a camaraderie began, so in looking at the bullets here, Steve, I don't know if you want me to move into education and training. I think I kind of did, because once the recruiting took place and I started hosting meetings, excuse me, I hope I don't get, excuse me, just a minute.
And Jody, before you move on, I'm curious about this for folks at various stages and in different organizations of different sizes. Is there a magic number for the number of Google Guides? You already said that you started out at 5,000 employees, and that is basically almost at 30,000, which is amazing. So you've scaled this. So what about evolution of participation?
That is such a great question. I'm losing my voice. Doesn't it figure? There really is no magic number. Excuse me. There is no magic number. It's how enthusiastic are your team members? How many people are they able to touch? When we went through COVID and we moved to online meetings, almost like we were able to touch more people. So you could be a Google Guide in a meeting. You could be one person out of 500 and get on that meeting and 40 people be on the line, right? And you can say, hey, while we're sitting around waiting for the speaker to join, did you see this new enhancement that just came down from Google? Let me show you how it works. And the Google Guides were the ones that were so excited and so enthusiastic about the product and helping their team members. They couldn't wait to share. The other thing that we did, excuse me, oh my goodness, for our Google Guides was we made it very easy for them to sign up, and be a part of the program. So we also rewarded their contributions. I will say I am a consummate person. I'm constantly looking at who's enthusiastic, who's excited, who's vocal. So the person that's vocal in the meeting, I would say to them, hey, you know what? If you come and join our team and you become a Google Guide, you're going to get more face time. There's probably opportunities for promotions for you. Once you become a Google Guide, I may reach out to you and say, hey, can you help this executive? When they come on board, can you help them with the Google Guides training? Can you help them with training? Hey, come and put a badge on your profile. Now, again, this is not something we had 7 years ago. We didn't add badges to our profile 7 years ago. I think this is something we added maybe a year ago, but you wouldn't believe the Google Guides that have added their badge to their profile. The other thing that I tell them is, you know what? Mention this in your performance reviews. Let your managers know the awesome work that you're doing. Get enhancements before everybody else gets them. So the person on the, you're looking like, who has the best Google Guide to recruit? I often say, the person that's running out to get the new iPhone in October is the person you want on your team. Not necessarily because they're the most technical, but because they want the new product. So what we do with our Google Guides is we give them the enhancements and they get to try them and test them before anybody else. They're giving Google feedback. This is what we like about the enhancement. This is not what we like about the enhancement. And then when the enhancement does come down the line or you release it, our Google Guides know how to work and how to use the product. And early on, you, Google, Steve, used to give us some swag. So that was a big lure. So if you have it in your budget, because we sometimes now buy the swag on our own. I know that you have a website where you can go and buy swag. Offering people swag was such a big thing. In the beginning, we had lanyards. That's all we had was a lanyard. And the lanyard said Google Guide on it. And they got to wear that lanyard with their badge. And that was a big thing. It separated them. It distinguished them from everybody else. And then, looking at the third bullet here, we started to provide them and equip them with resources. I will tell you, your Google Workspace Learning Center is so phenomenal. I do not ever try to reinvent the wheel. So early on, people used to say to me a lot of times, can you write an article about X? Can you tell us how to do X? And I would be like, go under the Google Workspace Learning Center because it's already there. There's GIFs there. There's products, portfolios, PDFs, all kinds of resources. So I always equip the Google Guides with information they need so that they are able to answer questions that they get in their sphere of influence effectively.
Jody, there's something you said that stood out to me, and I think it's worth kind of highlighting. Is you started off with just kind of a group of enthusiasts, and I know that you keep a watchful eye on your recruiting, but it looks like it really morphed into something else, into something where I think you said they're distinguished. And it's notable, it's recognized within your organization. I think that's really interesting. You mentioned something about badges, and I know working with you, I've seen oftentimes when I'm emailing with people inside of your organization, it's even in their title, on their signature line, which is very
Yes,
interesting.
they're proud of being a Google Guide, right? And some of them have stepped up to leadership positions within the Google Guides program. So they've distinguished themselves because people started to rely on them. They started becoming an expert in a certain area.
I,
And so,
I was going to say, I believe even being on, with your executive leadership and then being recognized in town halls. So,
yes.
having that executive endorsement, I thought was very, very fascinating. But even they recognized, of all the things to talk about, right, that goings on within their large business,
You
they
know,
took a moment.
that's interesting that you say that. That was, again, not something that happened early on. It was part of the evolution. I started to write to their managers and I would write 2 levels up and I would say, hey, I want you to know how impactful your employee has been in the Google Guides program because they did X. And, they were hosting transformation labs, or they were, helping people solve problems. It was just amazing the kinds of things that they did. So I took the time to write to their manager to let them know, they're just an exemplary employee, and this is the extra they are doing above and beyond. And then the managers started to catch on and say, hey, this program's really phenomenal. And then people started to approach me that wanted a champions program for their group that they were running. And they would, come to me and say, hey, how did you start up the Google Guides? Because it became such a part of our culture here at our company that other people started to say, I want to run a program like that one. They didn't call it guides, but they called it champions or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would think for those participating, and certainly those leaders or those looking to build this program, think through how you can elevate the station of this. I mean, it costs nothing really to do that, except maybe some time. But making this a point of distinction as repayment, as an extra. And I like that you said about giving early access to those enthusiasts as well. And I know that moves the needle for some. Thanks, Jody. All right, recruiting process. So you touched on it briefly. Can you take us a little bit more through how you're kind of surveying the land digitally and maybe in person?
So digitally, it's really kind of fun. So I'll be on a meeting and I'll notice that somebody else is talking about a Google Workspace enhancement, and and I know they're not on the team. And so I'll sit there and I'll listen to them talk about the Google Workspace enhancement. The next thing you know, I'm asking them, hey, have you ever heard of the Google Guides program? Would you like to be a part of the team? And I start telling them all about the team. So I constantly am recruiting without really recruiting. I'm just looking for those people that are, that are willing to share with what they know with other people. Then I send them an email. So I will always follow up with an email, and the email is pretty, it's a template, by the way, that I created in Gmail. And so I don't have to recreate it all the time. And it basically leads them to what is a Google Guide, there's an attachment to it, et cetera. But it basically sets out the expectations that I have, or that they should expect to be part of the program. But I also tell them, there's going to be times when you're going to have bandwidth, and there's going to be times when you don't have bandwidth. Just join the team, be a part of it, get to know the enhancements. And then even if you're just, again, I mentioned this earlier, just telling the person beside you, that person will tell somebody. It's like the best marketing campaign ever. So they will then acknowledge that they received the email and that they still want to be a Google Guide. And then I have them fill out an introductory slide, which sounds like an onerous kind of a step. But it's really what I've noticed over the years. And again, this is not something I did in the beginning. I put it into a slide deck, and it says meet the Google Guides. And there's a slide on every single Google Guide. But what I do then, once they fill out this slide, I take the slide and I introduce them to the rest of the team via our chat space. That is only for Google Guides. It's a chat space only for us. I introduce them to the rest of the team. It's really high touch. We keep it fun. In this particular example, this gentleman put that he had a parrot and her name was Pearl. I learned that there were 3 other Google Guides on the team that had a parrot. And this caused so much like commotion, and GIFs started flying about parrots and birds and whatnot. And this particular Google Guide, who joined the team in Athens, Greece, right, starts interacting with people, in Poland and in the UK and in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm located. And so there's this high touch, it's fun. They feel like they're a part of something larger. Maybe they're fairly new to the team. This particular person was part of an acquisition. They're fairly new to the team, and now they're part of a team, so it's really grown. It's like wildfire. I don't even really do very much anymore, to be
See, that's
honest.
interesting. I mean, it sounds like you've helped to shift the culture, through these very kind of practical ways, is what I'm gathering from this, Jody.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm in a financial industry, right? I don't know how many other people, in a financial industry are sending around GIFs all the time, but this particular team, we get to have fun. So we send GIFs to each other all the time. When there's a holiday, I'm constantly sending, holiday GIFs. Of course, we're keeping it very professional. But this is the team that has a lot of fun, and a lot of people want to be a part of it.
That's great. So I know that you also use extensively the full suite of products, but
Yes, we do.
I think you mentioned before you started very humbly with just a Google group. Question and answers. How do you do this? How do I format this cell? And then it kind of evolved along with our products as well. So can you tell us a little bit about the success you've had with using chat spaces? How
Yeah.
do you
So
use them?
I mentioned earlier, right, when we started as a Google group, I was so surprised by the fact that every question that came into that Google group, and they were from all over the world, were being answered in 15 minutes. One of the things that I really focus on when I'm recruiting is to make sure that I have Google Guides in all the time zones, right? But once the evolution of chat spaces developed, we started thinking, maybe we should develop a chat space for each Google Workspace application. So this is kind of an example of what it looks like here. I tried to take some of them, but we have a chat space for sites, docs, sheets, slides. So if somebody comes in and asks me a question, let's say, and I don't know the answer, I'm like, let me put you in the Sheets chat space. Because now not only is the SME, our subject matter expert for Google Sheets, the one kind of leading that chat space, now it's self-service because there's all these other people in the organization that have learned from being in that chat space how to actually handle something. And so now they're answering questions too. So the origin of chat spaces has really taken off for us. Then we even created one just for our executive assistants, because a lot of the blog updates that come through are about co-hosting and things that an executive assistant who's running a very large meeting needs to know about. So I have a SME that's over all of the executive assistants, and she'll make sure that all of the executive assistants all over the world have the update about co-hosting. So the communication has just grown. Again, it's an evolution.
That's
So
great. And we talk about, how much time this takes, right? And a lot of this sounds very daunting, that it takes a lot of effort, but you've also found ways to automate some of the updates. Isn't that right?
yeah, so some of our superstars on the Google Guides team that work in the department that I'm in developed a webhook. And so instead of team members finding out about an update, on The Verge or on LinkedIn or whatever, we now have them coming directly into our chat space. So we know when there's an outage, if Google's, down for some reason, which is very rare, but we also know about every single blog update. It comes to us rather than a peer or somebody else in the organization telling us about it. The Google Guides are in the know first about the
It's incredibly clever. And again, relatively new, I'd say, as well, just throughout the evolution. And then, you and I have spent a lot of time, and I know you spend effort on this with setting up these introductory meetings. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what this is and what's discussed? And this, how would you advise the people on that are listening in on how to kind of format this and think about?
So again, part of the evolution, didn't do this in the beginning, but ran a survey last year. And in the survey, I wanted to know how to make the program better. I started to notice that the Google Guide monthly meetings that I held, the attendance started to dwindle, and I wanted to know why. So I put out a survey, and one of the things that I found out as a result of the survey was the time wasn't working for everybody, right? So we kind of thought, okay, maybe we'll have one at 9, and again another one at 4. The ones that we were running were once a month at noon, blah blah blah. So one of the things that I realized was, okay, the timing wasn't working. The other thing that I realized was the new Google Guides who were coming into the program, no one was telling them about the resources they had available to them. So the survey really gave me the idea to start these introductory meetings. So for all the new Google Guides that I recruited over the last month, or anybody that wasn't able to attend the former meeting, they come to this meeting. And usually it's around 6 to 8 people. So the really cool thing about this is they're also meeting all the other newbies on the team. And so they're not really afraid to ask in front of a tenured Google Guide, maybe a question that may sound silly. But I basically go through all of the things that a new Google Guide that can be successful. What will make you the most successful? So I tell them about the news articles that I write. I tell them how to follow me. I basically tell them, about the Google Workspace Learning Center. I tell them about the resource pages on TeamGP. A lot of them didn't even know they existed. And I was like, oh my goodness. They were like, so I basically go over all of the things that are shown here. And then I also tell them to add their badge, and I give them the way to add their badge to the profile picture, which is up in the right-hand corner here. That's my picture with my badge on it. We show them how to do that. And then I show them how to provide Google with feedback, because another thing that our teams want to know is how do we provide feedback to Google on things that we'd like to see change in our environment. And then I encourage them to add their volunteerism to their 4 talks, which is what we call our performance meetings with our bosses. And then I encourage them to watch and listen from the tenured Google Guides first. Give yourself a good 6 months, maybe 3 to 6 months before you start answering questions. So it really gets them off on a better foot. I also give them training resources that they can take if they want to be the best Google Guide that they can be.
So it sounds like you flood them, you equip them with lots of knowledge, and give them some time to kind of breathe and figure out what works well for them. So you've gone from groups, which is phenomenal. You've gone into chat spaces, into delegated spaces, into some ownership there. And then you mentioned this notion of TeamGP. What is TeamGP?
Oh goodness, yes. So TeamGP is our company's intranet, and it's developed with Blue Maps. And this is an example of one of the pages that I have built on TeamGP. There is an entire section called Google Workspace, and they're all of the resource pages. And this one page was dedicated to calendar. All of the pages are identical. So in the front, in the center, where under calendar, you'll see that there is the SME listed. The SME's picture is blocked out here. The SME's name, you can actually tap on that link and it'll go directly to the SME if you want to communicate directly with the SME. A little bit about Google Calendar, how you can find important links in reference to Google Calendar, and any other important links in regards to how we handle things at our company. On the right-hand side is a revolving news article that is, again, on every page. In this particular instance, you will only see articles that reference calendar. So it'll rotate all of the calendar blog updates that have happened over the last 6 months. And then on the bottom are all the newsletters. Every page, again, is identical. On the left-hand side, where the blue box is, the number 3, you can actually click on that box and join the calendar chat space. So it's just a really, just an example of how we can also, our Google Guides refer to these pages all the time. So if somebody asks a question about Google Calendar, they'll be like, let me show you the link. And they'll send them directly to this page. And I also reference the Google Workspace Learning Center, the Google Workspace channel on YouTube. And so all of those links are contained within each page.
It's a really thoughtful approach, and I like the idea of this notion of elevating the station of these SMEs, these guides that are in the organization, and having them front and center.
Yes,
it's kind of brand recognition inside of an organization. That's
a lot
really
of them
great.
write their own articles. So in the beginning, I used to write all the articles myself. And now a lot of them, write their own articles. This is an example of the navigation panel. I wanted to show you the navigation panel on the left-hand side because you will see listed under Google Workspace applications, each of the individual applications. So we have a page for every single application. Recently, I just, because again, this was not built, Rome was not built in a day, right? This has been 7 years I've been in the making. I just added a page all about accessibility because you, Google, added a whole resource center on the Workspace Learning Resource Center about accessibility needs. And so I put, the person in our company who's the person you can go to if you need help with, visual, your visual needs, your hearing needs, et cetera.
Well, it's phenomenal. There's lots of cross references here, right? With between the products, between resources, there's owners. People I would think have a very clear idea on where to go. It's a one stop in so many ways, and just direct links to some of these chat spaces as well. It's incredibly, in my opinion, thought through and just very thoughtful. And as we think about efficiencies and collaboration and productivity, I imagine just minutes and hours being shaved off collectively, even days if you're thinking at an organizational level. So really thoughtful. So just a quick reminder, we got about 15 minutes left. There's a couple more kind of closeout slides. We'll get to some Q&A. I know a couple of you have already added some questions, which have been starred for us. And I hope this has been helpful. So Jody, again, getting back to this notion of evolution. So we're going back to 2017. I think this is a pretty powerful just timeline of how this started, just again, with such humble beginnings and what it's evolved to with just this really intricate site, these well-developed chat spaces.
Yeah, so the evolution again started on the left-hand side back in 2017 with our migration to G Suite. We still have people saying G Suite. We make them put $1 in a jar every time they say it. But we started with moving to Google Workspace back in 2017 and created this early adopter first wave migration team and made them Google Guides. Then, as I mentioned earlier, I started the monthly Google Guides meeting. Then I started to create the pages on Team GP. Formed a SME team, which basically means over each Google Workspace application, we have a subject matter expert. So for example, I could not keep up with 400 changes a year, every single I was like, I can't keep up. So I was like, you know what? I know somebody who's really good at sheets on the Google Guides team. And I asked him to be our Sheets me. And he was like, yes. And so he became our Sheets me. Then we got a Docs me. Then we got a Slides me, a Sites me, a Gmail me. And I have a SME now over every single application. So if ever somebody should come to me and ask me a question, I can either refer them to the Sheets me or put them in the Sheets chat space or that particular chat space. So then you can see the creation of chat spaces was formed, daily news articles, weekly newsletters. I started to do newsletters, which was really kind of fun. Our company's not real big on sending out a lot of emails, so I do it bi-weekly. Then I launched Google Workspace productivity sessions, and these are sessions that if a business unit leader says, hey, my team really needs help with X on Google Workspace, I may ask a SME or one of our Google Guides to attend with me so that I have their support. They can help me with answering questions. They may even lead some of the sessions.
That's phenomenal. And I was going to say, I know we've got a pretty extensive partner network as well. Google does, and who is versed in this. And I know Jody is dabbled in that to some degree in the history, but a lot of this was done just by the organization under Jody's leadership. And Jody, I guess if we were to take away the folks here tips of just looking at this and the evolution, what would you want to leave folks with who are maybe intimidated to get started? A good place to kind of start.
Just start with a small team of Google Guides, maybe try to get 10. I would start with something very small and just find somebody who's really, really passionate about leading other people, because these leaders have stepped up into positions. Now they have gotten so much face time. They've gotten promotions. And so I'm constantly telling them, about, how this is going to impact their career. And it's impacted their career in very, very positive ways. So start small and build, and don't feel like, you need to do all of this today. Just get a team of 10 people and host a monthly meeting. That's how I would start.
That's great. So, and I know some of the comments have mentioned this as well. So just in terms of reporting, I know, we go back and forth on this and on this topic and have for some time, but, wanted to leave you all with just some ideas around how to capture some of the reporting. And if you don't know, do know now, and feel inclined to research more. The admin console does provide some information. Work Insights, a built-in tool about some of the functionality and how specific groups are using this. There's some clever things that our customers do with BigQuery, exporting and putting Looker Studio on the front of that. I know there's some comments about kind of templatizing that, and we can touch on that here in a minute. And then don't forget about our partners. We've got an extensive partner network. They can either help you with this, or there's some niche industries who've gone out and done some really remarkable work around putting some insights behind how folks are using these tools, which groups are really putting the heat maps to it. And I know that Jody, you all use a combination of these tools in the history to kind of inform you on where to lean in more in certain areas. And coming down to the home stretch here, we talked about surveying. So where do surveys fit in for global payments? I know some organizations are very survey heavy and some are not. Where does your organization sit, generally
I've really
speaking?
seen this vacillate over the years. When I first started, we used to do surveys. We were smaller then. Our company just really, honestly, surveys is just not a part of our culture, to be really honest with you. I do use them when I can with my smaller group, because I can, reach out to my group. But anything that we do across the organization, we really do not invest in surveys very heavily. We just did one recently on culture for the entire organization. But again, I think they're a phenomenal tool, but it's just not something we use.
Yeah, it's great. And thanks for your honesty there. So many organizations are different. I think that's one of the things we wanted to press upon this group, is that it's okay. Some folks are very email heavy, some are not. Some are chat heavy, third party, and that's okay. I think there's tools and space to make any combination of these things work for you and your organization. And we'll just kind of skip ahead. So just some of the things that I know Global Payments looks at, and something we talk about pretty much weekly. But feature usage, right down to the granularity. And I know oftentimes you have questions for us, and we talk to our product teams, so we get some really interesting insights. Everyone, especially now in 2024, are always looking at that bottom line and ROI, and being able to find supporting reasons and numbers, and find areas to help where what's working and what's not. Always focusing on productivity and collaboration, documents that are open, that are shared, and then more importantly, getting signals for employee wellness, and having those Google guides. We found, Jody, that they are the eyes and ears of their respective groups and their peer groups, and them coming together. You've generally gotten a sense of where things are, from mental health or just the health of an organization. You get those signals early on, which I think has been really clever. So resources, if you can take a screenshot of this, and we'll get into kind of where you can learn more. Again, we have an amazing partner network. Keep that in the back of your mind as well. There's an amazing Google Cloud community that you can connect to. There's links to that. And I encourage you to do that if you don't have an account, but it's an excellent way to connect with your peers, your Google Workspace peers, and globally for that matter, and get tips and tricks and just share success stories. All right, so on to the Q&A, Jody. So I want to, again, thank everyone who submitted questions in advance. We went through all of them, just so you know. We really made it a point to try to blend in some of those into the content here, but there was a couple I thought were worth kind of singling out. So how can I reward Google Guides non-financially?
By the way, I love the questions that are coming into the chat space, and I loved the questions that you forwarded ahead of time. When I saw this one, I was like, oh yeah, because we don't reward them financially, of course. So I kind of mentioned throughout our presentation today some of the things that we do. We got them swag, right? Little stickers that can stick on their computer. But I mean, that is a little bit of finance. Early on, we asked Google, to do that for us. So we didn't pay anything for it then. But now it's just a minimal cost, and sometimes we don't find an issue with doing that. But the other ways I mentioned is I talk to their supervisors, and I make sure that that their volunteerism is considered as a very important part of their job. I distinguish them. They get the Google badge that they get to put on their profile. They get to put it in their signature if they want. There's just they get all of the enhancements. That's one of the things that I always talk about is, look, you're going to get the enhancements before everybody else, and you're going to know about what Google is changing. And a lot of people are really into that. And then a lot of people are really want to help their peers. So I'll say you get to help your peers, do better at their work. You'll get to help with employee satisfaction. So I don't know if I touched on everything, Steve. You meet with me all the time. I'm trying to
I
think
think
of
you've
other
nailed it.
ways.
I think the elevating of station, it's really, I've seen the cultural transformation in my short time working with you. That's one, but just even the badges, it's been amazing to see how delightful that is. And it went from not mattering and kind of siloed to, wow, how do you get that? How do I get that as an employee in your organization? It's really taken off. So, love this one. For organizations that don't see a need for Google Guides, hopefully we've convinced you all to some degree. Are you taking that one thing? How would you convince them, Jody?
So, talk to your support tech, your support teams, and let them know about how much they can take off their shoulders, because the Google Guides can answer a lot of questions that would typically come into your support desk. The other thing is it's just increased our Google Workspace adoption tenfold and our adoption, because it's not any one person trying to train or people. And what I notice in our organization, I know all our organizations are probably not this way, but I do training classes, and people come to training classes, but not like they will listen to a Google Guide.
Right.
So if the Google Guides are very hands-on, and they're very, they get to touch the people that are in their sphere of influence that we would never touch. The other thing that I think that they really help with is changes. People fear change. And when they have this person sitting right beside them, showing them how the product works, it really alleviates so much fear. And so that, if nothing else, that would be one of the main reasons that I would want to have a Google Guide on the team, and how I would convince leadership.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and I can kind of second that as well. Oftentimes discoverability. People are accustomed to a set of tools and a way of doing things, and they're not always aware of certain features, and they'll therefore ask, "Hey, can I have this tool? Can the organization open its pockets to give us this extra thing?" Then, more oftentimes than not, that it's not needed. I mean, there are instances that it is, but more oftentimes, no. And it's one thing for someone removed from it, Google or even you, Jody, at that level, but the person sitting next to them, just having an intimate knowledge of that, being connected to that, can kind of show them the path, which is I've seen bring great success.
The other thing, I think it changes culture, the company's culture, because it's not like you're going to get Google Workspace and you're going to have to use it. It's like a team of people now that are helping them use the product, who are excited and encouraging them about using the product. So it's not like it's, an ultimatum,
That's
basically.
right. So we'll try to get to a couple of more. This one I think you addressed earlier, if I'm not mistaken. So how do you identify participants in a large remote-only organization? There's a lot of them.
So I work remotely, right? And I'm the one primarily doing most of the recruiting, right? I do ask the other Google Guides, hey, if you see somebody who's passionate about the product, please tell them about the program, and then send them my way, right? But I kind of mentioned that when I'm in meetings and I see somebody who's maybe telling somebody else about an enhancement, I'm like, oh, have you heard about the Google Guides program? So I'm always looking for that person that's encouraging, that's talking about Google Workspace, that's excited about Google Workspace, and wants to share that information with their peers. They don't have to be a technical person. So
That's
I hope that answers. But I work remote 100% of the time, pretty much, and I am constantly recruiting. And there's not a month that goes by that I probably don't have at least 4 new people.
Which is pretty phenomenal, year over year, month over month. So, we're coming down to the wire here. Maybe we have time for one more question, and then, what I was going to suggest, really thoughtful questions, type in the chat. If folks want to find you, Jody, I know we talked about this. What's the best way if they have these questions for you, someone who's been doing this for years? What's a good way to engage with you?
So I really tried to become more active in the Google Cloud community. So that would be a great place. I think that you will see this presentation there, and that would be a great place to ask your questions. I will definitely be monitoring it over the next couple of weeks, or until the questions run out. I would love to help anybody get started, or if you have fear, whatever, I would love to help. And then the other way you can find me is on LinkedIn. Of course, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn.
Thanks so much for that. So googlecloudcommunity.com is the site that Jody mentioned, and I know it's also monitored very closely with Googlers as well, and other peers and folks that are in Jody's position as well. Excellent questions. Thanks for submitting. And I apologize we didn't make it to them. Looking through these, there are answers and suggestions I know for a fact that can maybe help put you on a path. And thanks, especially Brian, who made some suggestions here. Do know we all monitor that site. We listen to every bit of feedback. Believe it or not, we're a large organization, but we listen to it all. We take a lot of it to heart, and we're always striving to do better and help our organization. But want to thank Jody again very much for imparting some of her knowledge and wisdom that you've taken on and amassed over the past 7 years. And thank each of you who chimed in and listened and asked these questions and took time away from your day jobs to join with us live. And again, this is recorded. So wish you all a great rest of your week. And thanks again for joining this session. And thanks again, Jody.
Bye.